EC4Max is a project that has been funded by the European Commission's LIFE program. Its aim is to find cost-effective approaches for reducing air pollution while minimizing climate change. In this presentation I'm going to show you which data have been used, where they come from and how they are used towards end. I focus on the road transport as to give you a specific example, but what I'm showing applies in a similar manner to other sectors. A lot of sophisticated modeling tools exist, and each has been specifically developed for a certain aspect. For instance, emissions have been modeled with the corporate model, future economic activity and fuel demand with the PRIMES model for Europe. Air quality is among others modeled with Chimere. Gains model is used to calculate impacts from pollutant concentrations, and all these aspects are integrated into gains and traded off against the emission control costs. I'm going to explain this a little more in future. Let's look at the example of road transport in more detail to see how to get from economic activity to pollutant emissions. One of the hard facts we start from is the fuel consumption. That is pretty well known, usually to drivers for cars, trucks and any other vehicles alike, and it is recorded in national statistics. Knowing the specific consumption of the cars, trucks and other vehicles and their stock and their mileage, we get an estimate and quite well statistics about total consumption in the country, and this is aggregated at Eurostat level for all member states of the European Union. In addition, we need not only to know the absolute number of stock, but also the composition in terms of emission control standards or Euro norms. Next is that we need to know what are the emission factors, the rate of emissions per unit of fuel consumed for each of these unit standards, European emission standards. Data on these come from laboratory experiments and they are aggregate to average emission factors. That's the unit that we need. Next, how to get from current emissions to future trend in emissions. We start again from economic activities projected by the PRIMES model, which is coherently doing this for all member states in the European Union, so that we have a consistent starting point. For instance, for road transport, the model predicts that economic activity, in this case transport volume, is increasing over the next decades, in this case for Germany. At the same time, fuel consumption for cars is expected to decrease as a result of increasing fuel economy. This we use as input, and knowing now fuel consumption, the turnover of the fleet, their characteristics in terms of emissions and emission factors, we can get from 1 year of emissions to a future trend in emissions. Having got slightly decreasing fuel consumption and strongly decreasing unit emissions, we expect for the future strongly decreasing pollutant emissions from road transport, not only for Germany but also for many other European member states. Having established the pollutant concentrations, we can now proceed to the health impacts and environmental impacts. For doing so, we use dose response functions, which translate concentrations times dose for the vulnerable population or the vulnerable environment to their impact. Plotted here is a chart for Europe showing the loss in life expectancy due to fine particulate matter, and the darker the area, the more months are lost of life. Despite decreasing trends in pollutant emissions, there remain a number of important air quality problems in Europe. Also, not only today, but also under future trend expectations. These are in the phase of established air quality targets within the European Union at the level of national member states and from local authorities. That's now here where the gains model comes into full play. We follow the whole impact pathway from emissions over air quality to impacts and balance now the desired targets off with extra costs needed for measures to achieve these targets. As pollutant sources and impacts are unevenly distributed across Europe, it is a non-trivial task to optimize the best way and combination of these measures in order to achieve targets at minimal costs. In the model world, we can now play around with a number of different emission control measures, find out what is their impact on resulting pollutant emissions, on stock or the technology that is used, calculate the consequent air quality concentrations and the resulting health impacts and impacts on the environment, and see whether we now with these extra measures will achieve the air quality targets desired previously, at what costs. Once this is done in an iterative manner, we can find the best solution to achieve the targets at minimal costs. Results of these are reported in the main reports and used within the revision of the EU's thematic strategy.